Welcome back to Boilers and Beyond. I'm Jordan Jones, here today to put a wrap on the 2023-24 Purdue basketball season. I'm joined today by Chase Chats. You've seen him on Twitter. You've probably seen him on YouTube. Lots of Purdue basketball stuff over on his various channels. Wanted to bring him on today. Look, let's face it. I've been doing this every week since November, talking about Purdue basketball. I've kind of said all there is to say at this point. So, wanted to bring Chase on, talk to him a bit, and just kind of have a conversation to put a bow here on what was quite possibly the best season in Purdue history. Chase, thanks for coming on today, man.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jordan. Like I said, I'm a big, Boilers and Beyond fan. I didn't know we had family friends knew each other, get us connected. So this is awesome. What a tremendous season. Um, the journey that Purdue, got to go on and go to Phoenix and get to the final game. And, Zach Edey took us on a ride that I think we may never see again at Purdue. I do think they're going to get back, but this was a year to remember. So thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess, just to start, it's funny because basketball seasons are so long, right? It kind of hit me as I'm sitting there at the Final Four. This has been 5 months now. This thing started way back in early November.
Right.
And I guess, obviously this season, as I've talked about a million times, had a lot of pressure on it, had the potential to really be, I don't want to say miserable, but could have really been long and difficult for Purdue fans. At what point did you realize that Purdue was really really good, that they were significantly better than last year's team that was a one seed in the tournament and won the Big Ten by 3 games?
Right. I would say um, when Lance Jones committed, I talked a lot about. I said, man, they got a nice guy come off the bench. He's going to be a senior. He's going to add a lot to Purdue. Then I went to the open practice in August and saw Lance, and I was like, man, that dude's going to start. And Purdue's going to be a little bit smaller. They're going to have a guy who can defend at 94 feet, can handle, can shoot the rock, and play next to Braden potentially. Once I saw him in person, I took back my tweet when he committed about coming off the bench because I said that dude's going to start. And I think Lance Jones was a big time. Not only the impact he made, but the joy he brought. He made the team super loose. Like I was at the 16 seed game against Fairleigh Dickinson, and I felt the team was super tight. And I thought that Lance brought an element to the team that just didn't exist last season. In the when Zach was a junior, obviously he was tremendous. He won National Player of the Year. Purdue was great. They won the Big Ten. They won the Big Ten tournament. But when they added Lance Jones, he brought more than I think anybody could have ever anticipated to Purdue. And the joy and how loose he played is when I was like, okay, this guy right here is like, he's different. He's a winner. He's played a lot of college basketball. And if Braden Smith takes a jump as he did and play next to Lance Jones, Purdue can do something really special in the backcourt. And obviously, we saw it this season. But I thought Lance Jones was, people like to use the term X factor. He was way more than that this year. I thought he took Purdue to a different level.
Yeah, it's interesting. So much of the hand wringing about Purdue in 2023 going into the tournament, and no one saw Fairleigh Dickinson coming, but the constant harp was that Purdue's guards aren't good enough. They have freshman guards. And then going into this year, the question mark was the guards. And I had said on here, all summer, all fall, if Purdue is, if you think Purdue's a top five team, and I did, you're completely banking on Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer taking that jump into their
Mm-hmm.
second year.
Mm-hmm.
Did they ever? I mean, Braden
Right.
Smith earns honorable mention All American honors, first team All Big Ten. Tremendous year from him. And, you're right with Lance Jones. So much of it was what he can do on the court, but so much of it was just his personality as well.
Mm-hmm.
He was just the perfect guy for Purdue at the right time.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on it right there about obviously Braden is tremendous, and the way Braden can just kind of control the game no matter who you're playing. um, get up and down the court, get everybody involved, pass first guy. But this year, I think it was the Alabama game in Canada when he started coming off the drop coverage and was hitting shots and kind of looking for his shot more. And Fletcher was tremendous making the three ball this year. And Lance just integrated himself perfectly with those guys. And he played with so much joy and he made shots and he played defense. And I just think the guard trio is kind of what spearheaded Purdue a little bit this year. And you look at, you go back to when those guys were freshmen, they were great. Obviously, like I mentioned, they won the Big Ten. But once they added Lance to what they had going on, we're just a whole different team because Zach's going to be Zach, and he's going to be tremendous and dominate games. But the guard play and how athletic we got with Miles Colvin and Camden Heide and Lance Jones, and obviously Fletcher went from 31% or 32% from three to 44%, became a totally different shooter, and Braden Smith became a top 5 point guard, and they took us on the a ride of a lifetime to Phoenix, man.
And the interesting thing with Fletcher Lawyer, the jump 12, 13%
Right.
was fascinating, but it's that confluence of Lance Jones being a legit scoring threat next to him and
Yes.
Braden Smith looking for that shot because his volume went down. He's
Yes.
not
His
taking
volume
as
was down. Yes.
he's not taking as many threes. As a
Right.
freshman, Fletcher Lawyer scores 12 points a game, shooting a lot,
Yeah.
but nonetheless, he was the second leading scorer on a team that's a number one seed.
Right.
I think to a degree he gets underappreciated because, sure, he has physical limitations, but the guy's a flat out scorer. He's a really good offensive player. And I think it's going to be interesting to see just over the next 2 years as he gets more comfortable going to the rim and continues shooting at a really high clip. He's going to be a guy that when he goes through his senior day at Mackey Arena and you see how many points he scored, folks aren't going to realize it at the time, but he's going to have scored a lot of points for Purdue.
No, that's a really good point, man. And like when you look at Fletch, you think of just the 3 point shooting and being on the perimeter, but he does a great job of getting downhill, playing angles, getting off the glass, getting to the free throw line. And we saw it in the NCAA tournament with Fletch, getting to those mid range shots, knocking them in. He's a big time scorer, and the thing I like about Fletch, and he's been on my show a lot, he's a great kid, is just his confidence is very unwavering. Nothing really bugs Fletch. He's going to go out and, get 10, 14 points and play his role. The hardest part when you're the third or fourth guy is you don't know how many shots you're going to get. Like you may have a game where you get 14, 15 shots or a game where you get two or three. And I thought that Fletch did a great job this season playing off of Braden and Zach and Lance, and I think Lance had a lot to do with it, opened up the wing a little bit. But Fletch, he knows angles, he knows spots, he knows where his shots are, and he shot a higher percentage this year. And and like you said, when he goes to senior day, that dude's going to score a lot of points at Purdue. It's kind of like Etwan Moore. He's not Etwan Moore, but you didn't know how many points Etwan Moore scored at Purdue because he played with Robbie Hummel and Jawan Johnson. And I'm not saying they're the same type of player, but when a guy can go out every single game and get you 12, 17, 20 points, those points rack up over time.
Oh, that's exactly how Eatswan Moore was. I mean, you think of the one game where he scores 38 on Ohio State, but outside of that, it's not like he has all these legendary,
Right.
30 plus point games, but the guy was just remarkably consistent from day one. Yeah, there's a real element of that. And, it's, you're right. When he's the third, fourth option, he'd gone through that slump in February. And I'd talked on the podcast. Yes, obviously, like it's good for Purdue if you break out of that, right? You've got a good 3 point shooter who's not knocking down his open threes, but on such limited volume at times, how consistent can you expect someone to be? I mean, it's
Right.
already shooting can be fickle in nature, and then you're splitting these shots with Lance Jones, with Braden Smith, Mason Gillis, Cam Heide, Miles Colvin. I mean, whoever it may be. It's like this isn't realistic. That this isn't, you know, you're not going to walk out and just go 2 for 5 every game to become a 40% 3-point shooter. It's just not how
Right.
it works.
Sure. And I saw a page put out about he had one of the highest jumps in Big Ten history of freshman to sophomore, and I think I predicted exactly he would shoot 44% from three. I tweeted it last August. I said Purdue doesn't need to get in the portal because Fletcher Lawyer is going to shoot at least 44% from three next year, and how it ended up on that exact number, it just is what it is. But you get stronger legs, you play, and like you said, the volume changes. And I just think Braden Fletch did such a good job this season of embracing their role outside of Zach and those other guys like Mason and other guys who can really score the rock like Lance and Braden and Fletch. I mean, we just saw how much they benefited from Coach Painter's system.
Yeah, and it's interesting you bring up the system because my thought is, you brought up the transfer portal. And I remember, I read the message boards, I read Twitter. Last year, Purdue's at 12 scholarships after taking Lance Jones. And, a lot of folks are saying Purdue's got to add a shooter. Well, A, the the path to minutes was really complex there. Like that didn't portal's a two-way street. It didn't make sense for a 13th guy to come commit to Purdue, but also that's so against Purdue's system to a degree. Purdue's going to give its guys a real shot at success, and it had plenty of it from Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer. It was going to give them, a huge opportunity their sophomore year to guide the team. And you look back, and what if Purdue had pursued a 13th guy? It would not have worked out any better. I mean, that you weren't going to get a super high caliber player who wanted to come in and compete with that many guys. It just doesn't work that way. And it's fascinating to see how different programs approach the portal. It really, we're in a weird time in college basketball there, but it's very interesting.
No, you make a great point. Like, you know, you can either go out and go on a fishing trip for some players, or you can just develop your own. And I think Purdue has done a great job at finding talent early and recruiting them and being honest with them. And they develop talent. You can go out, like players win games, I think. Teams win championships. And if that rope is not going in the same direction, it's not going to be good for teams. And you look at the portal today, and like you talk about college basketball or college sports in general, anybody can go in the portal now, and you don't know what their intentions are, right? Like anybody can show up on a team and say, "Hey, this is what I told this is what my role is. I'm doing this. I'm making this much money." That's how special Purdue is right now, and they remind me a lot. And this is pre NIL, but when Butler made those Final Four runs, they had guys who just they developed talent, they recruited, they got guys who fit their system. They called it the Butler way. And with Matt Howard and Gordon Hayward and those guys, and Shelvin Mack, and Van Zant, they had tremendous players. And Purdue is kind of replicating that a little bit. You can get the most talent in the world, but they don't like each other. They don't know who each other are. It's hard to find success. And that's how Coach Painter and his staff are doing such a tremendous job. Our best players last year was an unranked guy who goes to National Player of the Year and a three-star point guard from Westfield who's 6 foot tall, is one of the top 5 point guards in America. And credit to Coach Painter and staff for being patient, getting the right guys, recruiting families, recruiting parents who understand, what's going on. And it's been awesome to see at Purdue, and especially, after some of the heartbreak that Purdue had, to see the success this year and, back-to-back Big Ten titles. They finally got to a Final Four. They're going to go to more Final Fours, but getting those right guys and getting everybody on the same page and the rope going in the same direction, I mean, that's the world, and Purdue has shown that.
Yeah, and on that unranked guy, Zach Edey,
Yeah.
I've said on the show, I don't know how you really compare Zach Edey to Glenn Robinson to Rick Mount. The sport is so different in each of those eras. You know, you're jumping around 30 years at a time, but Zach Edey leaves Purdue as the most decorated player in Purdue history.
Yes.
It is a story unlike anything we'll ever see again. What's just a memory or two of Zach Edey that kind of sticks out to you the most?
Memory, I would say just his commitments to Purdue. And whenever he committed, 7 foot guy, 7'4", not ranked, takes a chance on Purdue. I'm thinking, oh, is this guy going to redshirt? Another big guy. We've had a lot of big guys. Blah blah blah. His work ethic. He always worked on his game. He always gave it his all. And man, his development. Like when I hear people who never played basketball say, "Oh, he's just tall." He was 7'4" and didn't score in the NCAA tournament game against North Texas, and he hardly played. And then you look at what he did next to T. Will, and then he comes for his junior and senior year, and he's the best player in college basketball. Like that just doesn't happen overnight. So the big thing that I would say sticks out with Big Zach for me is how much he put into his game and his skill set and what he did for Purdue. Like basketball tells a story, I think. All sports do. But like his block on Dalton Connect to get Purdue to the Final Four, we're going to remember that in 50 years. But when he committed to Purdue, he's like, oh, he's just another dude, like, work on his game, do this. Is this guy, he's a project. He might redshirt, he might do this. I've never seen a kid come to Purdue and work on his game as much as he did. I mean, he could hardly catch a post pass when he was a freshman. I remember when I think they played Liberty their first game at him and Jaden Ivey. And I was like, man, that dude, he might be able to go a little bit. Like, he's got some skill. By the time he was a senior, I was like, man, this guy is a robot. I mean, everything he did was with purpose, and he played with so much passion and skill. And he worked on his touch. He worked on how he could communicate. He came out this year, his senior year, and defended on the perimeter. Just his work ethic, man. Like nobody could ever guess what he was going to be at Purdue this year, or when he got to Purdue in general. But man, he's special, and what he did, we're going to talk about in 30 years.
Yeah, the the just tall thing is just dumb. You know, when
Yeah.
when he was a fresh when he was a freshman, there was a little bit of that. You know, he was
Oh,
very raw.
absolutely. That's a great point.
He was very raw. I remember that game against Liberty, and someone had tweeted out the highlights, and it's a lot of alley oops. It's
Yes.
him just standing there being tall to a degree. But that season, you know, there was a stretch where he just picked up fouls like crazy on
Oh,
both ends.
he would be slapping dudes, elbowing guys on hook shots. He really struggled just with his sense of awareness a little bit. Man, by the time he was a senior, he could pass. Even as a junior, he could pass. And his skill set just grew so much that I think he started to piss other fan bases off to a point I'd never seen before because, we saw Purdue become the villain. But it's funny because when he was a freshman, even when he was a sophomore, when we lost to St. Peter's, he only played 19, 20 minutes a game. What he became to go and play 39, 40 minutes, score 37 in the national title game, and take Purdue to the Final Four, that dude is special.
Yeah, that game against Tennessee was really something. You know,
Yeah.
that to me was the culmination of everything. You know, obviously Purdue played two more games, Purdue won another game, and he scores 37 in the championship. But to put Purdue on his back the way he did, and you got to see him and Dalton connect, the two best players in the country this year, in my opinion, just go back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
And that block shot, you know, it's dumb and it's real minor, but it just shows it's an example of the progress he made defensively.
Yes.
Because as a freshman, as a sophomore, he doesn't make that play.
Yeah. He's not
It,
on the court. He's in foul trouble at that time.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it if he is that he's getting beat, they're getting around him, he's coming down and fouling something. That play just showed kind of the progress he made defensively, but just
Oh,
a really special career. And you know, as we look at the season, as you know, I said, get to the Final Four, get to the championship game. Other than just that fact, you know, that Purdue finally ended the 44-year drought and got to the Final Four. What will you remember the most about this season for Purdue?
The resilience. When I left the Fairleigh Dickinson game in, that's as low as it gets, right? And just nobody hit the portal unless kids who graduated. Brandon Newman graduated. He went to Western Kentucky, but everybody stuck together, and they heard all the noise. They got laughed at. I've never seen a team get laughed at the way Purdue did. Even coming off St. Peter's, I mean, it's 2 years just getting laughed at, and you're nothing. You're going to lose in the first weekend. I think I could pull up 1,000 bookmark tweets of my date with Destiny stuff. Oh, second round, first round. Those kids just how resilient and tough they are, and went and won the Big Ten again, smacked IU by 20 twice, went into Wisconsin and won, beat Michigan State. The Big Ten tournament, I didn't think had a ton of weight this year because they knew it was all about the big tournament. Then you get, they're going to lose in the first round. They're going to lose to Utah State. They're going to lose to Gonzaga, and they get all the way to the Final Four. I think the big thing for me and on this year's team and what I call the date with Destiny, just their resilience. They never folded to anybody. I mean, whatever it was, those dudes showed up.
Yeah, it's interesting. As I kind of said in the open, the season had the potential to be really, really difficult. Not in the sense that Purdue was going to have some horrible record or that
Right.
Purdue was going to be flirting with the bubble or anything, but with the schedule that Purdue had, you're in the Big Ten, which kind of down, but it's still never easy. Purdue very easily could have been going into the NCAA tournament, 8, 9 losses.
Yep.
You're a 3, you're a 4 seed, and maybe you won the Big Ten, maybe you didn't. Maybe you won in Maui, but probably didn't with that. But Purdue never once looked like the moment was too big for it. And
Sure.
never once looked like the pressure that was obviously there, right? It was there all year,
Mm-hmm.
but it never once looked like it was under some huge burden of pressure. And I think that's a real testament to everybody involved, from the coaching staff, with the messaging, with the players, because the coaches can say whatever they want. At some point, the players have to do their thing, and
Right.
I think you just factor it all in. And I'm with you. That was a remarkably impressive feat from Purdue to go 28-3 in the regular season.
Mm-hmm.
That's unheard of before you even factor in that Purdue played one of the toughest schedules in the nation. Just
Mm-hmm.
crazy.
Well, just like, when they lost last year, it was just about the failures. Purdue will never win the tournament. Zach comes back on May 31st last year, and it's, you know, what are they going to do? It doesn't matter too much. Nothing matters until March. It's March, 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 March. They won a lot until March, and then won in March, and that's what's special about that group. Um, it was all that team can't win when it matters, and they went out and won the Maui, beating Gonzaga, Marquette, Tennessee, all these great teams. Win the Big Ten by 3 games. Like you said, the Big Ten was what it was this year, but it was always Purdue cannot win when they get to that big tournament, and they did.
Yeah. And look, you know how I feel about that. I think it's quite silly that we have the majority of the narrative around these programs come from a single elimination tournament.
Right.
But Purdue needed that in the worst
Oh,
possible
absolutely.
way. Purdue absolutely needed that, and it got it. And I know Purdue fell a game short of kind of doing what Virginia did, but Purdue got its redemption.
Oh, yeah.
Purdue earned validation in so many ways, and I think Purdue's program has been operating at a really high level for a long time now. For the better part of the last decade, Purdue has been one of the better programs in America, especially when you look at, I guess, the time period from Caleb Swanigan on. But
Mm-hmm.
It's finally that validation that Purdue could get to the sports pinnacle
Right.
operating the way it did. And that you just can't say enough about how much that means to the program, how much it means to, I mean, as we saw, the Purdue fan base, the Purdue community, a really, really cool moment for Purdue here this spring.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I feel like the word I keep coming up with is Purdue is stamped. Like it was always Purdue, Sweet 16, Elite Eight, Virginia. Everybody was talking about they're stamped. They made it. They went to the Final Four. Everybody was always, you know, why don't Matt Painter and Gene Katie play the last four holes when they play 18 because they can't make the Final Four? Coach Painter will never go to the Final Four. Purdue will never go to the Final Four. Zach Edey is just tall. And now it's Purdue made the Final Four. They played in the final game, and now Purdue's going to suck because Zach Edey's gone. They only made it because Edey was there. Now the goalpost movers have showed up, and that's hilarious because they don't know what's coming. Them boys are ready.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm fascinated to see how next season unfolds. I think Purdue has a pretty high floor with Braden Smith, with Fletcher Lawyer, with Trey Kaufman Wren is
Right.
guys who are pretty established. You you have Camden Heide, you have Miles Colvin who have really high ceilings and I
Yeah,
think have shown enough that their floor is decently high, but there are so many question marks going into next season and it's kind of fun, right?
sure.
2 seasons ago was supposed to be that way. And then Purdue went on just an unbelievable heater early on, and all bets were off. The fun of watching a team grow was all there. But um, now Purdue goes into this season real quick to kind of wrap things up here. What are some of your initial thoughts heading into next season?
When you look at a team like they just played in UConn with the perimeter defense and how disruptive they were and how athletic they were, I think that's what Purdue can be as they move off of the Zach Edey era, who kind of what I think opened up the golden era of Purdue basketball. When you bring in a guy like Kenan Catchings, I've traveled and watched a lot of these high school guys play. Cannon reminds me a lot of Paul George, Brandon Miller. He's an NBA type player. He's very athletic. He's very, he's got a lot of length. He's so athletic, can get in passing lanes. Jakari Harris is probably the best defensive player in Georgia. Jack Benner, I think down the road, I love Dakota Mathias. He could be a better Dakota Mathias. You get a guy like CJ Cox who um, anybody that Coach Painter ever got late in recruiting has turned into be a great player at Purdue. Whether it was PJ Thompson, Carson Edwards, whoever it was. Um, Raleigh Burgess, I think, is going to be a tremendous player at Purdue. Just look, and Daniel Jacobson, I think right now, he could come out of his whatever dorm room next season. I think he's better than Matt Harms. He can come out, he can shoot the basketball. He's long, and then you have an upperclassman backcourt of Braden Smith, Fletcher Lawyer, Camden Heide, Miles Colvin, guys who are going to take jumps. And I think Trey Coffin Wren, like I mentioned earlier, could be more in that Travion Williams type role. Man, I think Purdue's going to three-peat the Big Ten. I'd be shocked if they don't win the Big Ten next year. I think they're going to be really athletic. I'm going to. Last year I dubbed it as the date with destiny, and this year is going to be the soaring Boilers because I think Colvin and Heide and Cannon Catchings and Jakari Harris are just going to be so damn athletic. And Braden Smith's the best player in the Big Ten. So you get a guy like Fletcher can shoot threes, Cam, all these guys flying around. I think they're going to be super athletic. They're going to be fast. They're going to be fun. There's going to be growing pains. When you lose a guy like Zach Edey, I'm not stupid. I mean, he was a lot of their offensive and defensive production, but Carson Edwards left Purdue, Jaden Ivey left Purdue, Travion Williams left Purdue, but Purdue's still good. So when I look at that, I just think next year is going to be a super, super athletic team and guys who know each other. And they're not a portal built team, and I think they're going to have a ton of success.
Yeah, your point on the defensive end is an interesting one because so much of what Purdue did on defense the last 2 years was built around Zach Edey.
Yes.
It was built to run guys off the 3-point line, dare them to go try to drive into Zach Edey, and force them to take a lot of tough twos. You lose Zach Edey, Purdue's going to have to do some things a little different defensively.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see what that looks like for sure. Bold. I respect the boldness of going out and saying that Purdue's going to win a third straight, but
I think they're going to.
it wouldn't shock me. You know, it's going to be an interesting, assuming Purdue kind of lives up to some of the potential and is in the mix for the Big Ten conference race. It's going to be an interesting comparison because I think some of the teams on paper right now that may be in that conversation are relying on the portal quite a bit. And
Sure.
it's going to be an interesting comparison between those methods of roster construction.
Yeah. I mean, you made a good point about just roster construction in general. Like, I think it means a lot when dudes know who the guys on their team are. When people show up, you don't know their intentions, but I think Coach Painter does a great job of getting people in the program that know what's going on. That rope, like I said, is going in the same direction. And if you can add guys like Harris and Catchings, who I think are going to be immediate impact dudes, Travion Williams averaged 18 and 10 in Europe whenever, or on their, their overseas tour whenever Zach was with Canada last year. If they go to more TKR on the block, like when Travion Williams was here, with all those athletes, and you got the best player in the Big Ten at point guard as a junior, I just don't see Purdue falling off. Zach is amazing. He's the best player ever at Purdue. Like I said, build a statue, retires, never do anything. I think they won it after Big Dog left, and that's why I think they're going to do the same thing. I think.
You raise a good point there. That's certainly true. Purdue looking for its first three-peat since the mid 90s, but
Yeah.
running low on time here. Chase, how should people go to find you, find your content, all of that?
No, thank you so much, man. I'm on Twitter a lot. I've connected with a graphic designer named Devin. He's at Boilermaker on Twitter. We made the Avengers NCAA tourney hype video. Then we did a couple different videos. So you guys can find me Chase Chats on Twitter, and then I'm Chase Chats. I think it's Chase Chats Boiler or something 4 on YouTube. But YouTube, we just got a new platform on my own like weekly show this year. It's going to look a little bit more like maybe the Pat McAfee show, where I have like stuff on the screen, the stuff scrolling at the bottom. So find me on Twitter, obviously, as Chase Chats. He's the random Purdue fan tweeting rock videos. And then I'll be on YouTube with a lot of cool stuff coming this season.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining me, Chase. For those of you listening, that's all we've got for today. Thank you for joining the show throughout the season. It's been a real pleasure. This is kind of the last episode that I'm going to spend focusing on this past season. So, Chase, thanks for coming on and breaking it all down. Next week on the Boilers and Beyond feed, I will have some spring football thoughts. I got to watch the spring game a couple days late, but got to watch it, have some thoughts. Transfer portal's open, and we start to look ahead to college football season. We're not that far away. We really aren't. So thank you guys for listening. I will talk to you again next week. Give Chase a follow on Twitter. Give me a follow at Boilers Beyond, and we'll talk to you next week.